Welcome to another week's analysis behind the news. Last week's headlines have led us to conclude that the John Birch Society continues to be proven accurate again and again. At the top of this is an article from thenewamerican.com. The headline is, Obama to UN, U.S. must accept constraints on sovereignty in order to accomplish UN goals. Now the article opens, in what is likely his final address to the United States General Assembly, President Obama offered Tuesday what called as the broad strokes of a course correction necessary to achieve global integration. In order to carry this progress forward, the President said he is convinced that in the long run, giving up some freedom of action, binding ourselves to international rules over the long term, enhances our security. Ladies and gentlemen, here we have the President of the United States who has sworn an oath to the Constitution, is the leader of the nation that is supposed to be the leader of freedom and liberty throughout the world, and here he's just telling an international body that the U.S. must give up sovereignty, and in turn the American people give up liberty to achieve enhanced security as well as global integration. Giving up sovereignty, this global integration? The John Birch Society has been sounding the alarm on this insider plan since 1958. We've been ridiculed at every turn regarding it, yet when the President of the United States confirms it, the media goes silent. Apparently they cannot be pulled away from covering the latest Hollywood divorce or the latest gaffes of Trump or Hillary. And the EU is the best example that we can point to regarding what global integration looks like. And the United Kingdom voted earlier this year to leave it. Folks, the country that we fought a war with to gain our own independence voted to release the chains of their bondage that originate from Brussels, the headquarters of the EU. Why would an American president advocate for the same bondage for his country? And the answer is simple. Regional integration through trade partnerships and agreements leads directly to the global integration of a one-world government, presumably through the UN, which is where President Obama was speaking. And if trade agreements are the vehicle by which these chains are delivered, then why are many Republican leaders backing current trade agreements? Are they in on this global integration scheme? To help answer this question, let's take a look at one part of the conservative movement was doing last week. The Convention of States held a mock constitutional convention in Virginia to demonstrate how nicely their plan of holding an Article 5 convention would rein in the federal government. Their plan is to have states propose amendments in order to add more checks to the Constitution. You see, they must believe that something is wrong with the Constitution, so it must be changed. Yet, they cannot answer why new amendments would be obeyed if the federal government is not following the Constitution now. Anyway, in an exercise that demonstrated their disregard for the Founding Fathers, as well as their low comprehension level of the Constitution, one of the amendments proposed at this mock constitutional convention suggested that states shall have the authority to abrogate any provision of federal law when 3/5 of the states approve the resolution. This is highly shocking when the so-called constitutional experts of their movement apparently haven't read or can't comprehend the 9th and 10th Amendments. These describe that anything not delegated to the federal government falls to the states, the people, which means that any state now can stand up to the federal government and abrogate anything outside of its areas of responsibility. States do not need to seek permission from other states. If this amendment is passed, the rights of the states to operate independently would be lost. The Constitution at best would be watered down, and at worst, the federal government's current levels of unconstitutionality would be one step closer to being constitutionally justified. Plus, this convention demonstrates that it cannot be held to just one amendment. Rather, it is an open convention. How in the world will a constitutional convention be controlled if it's open? They have the ability to rewrite the Constitution. Why would anyone want to water down the Constitution? Perhaps it's the same reason why anyone would want to promote abrogating sovereignty for globalism, to be just another step in the equation to move us closer to democracy and then invite regionalism before completely accepting globalism. And folks, these are conservatives who ought to know better. We think their leaders do know better. Perhaps their members ought to be asking them. Advocates for a con point to the federal debt to bring about a balanced budget amendment through this convention. After all, they claim 49 states have a balanced budget amendment for their state constitution. Why shouldn't the federal government? The Washington Times had an opinion piece published last week. The headline is a pending national financial crisis. And it's written by Sheila Weinberg, who is CEO of Truth in Accounting. And she writes, across the country, states have racked up $1.3 trillion in debt. In fact, 80% of states are in debt, meaning 40 out of 50 states do not have enough money to pay their bills. Yet every state, except for Vermont, has balanced budget requirements. Seems contradictory, right? She writes. She goes on, there are many accounting tricks government officials use to disguise the truth about state finances. These accounting tricks include counting borrowed money as income, delaying the payment of current bills until the start of the next fiscal year, and inflating revenue assumptions. However, the biggest accounting trick of all is excluding a large portion of government employee compensation, such as pension benefits, off the balance sheet. In fact, every state but South Dakota uses this trick. Employee compensation costs may not seem like a serious issue because retirement costs are not paid until employees retire. However, if those costs are excluded from budgets, the money that should have been set aside to provide for these costs is spent elsewhere. The result? State lawmakers don't have a true understanding of their state's financial situation, claim to balance their budgets while a majority of states go further in the red, and taxpayers are left to clean up the mess. Now, she also writes in the beginning of the piece here that state-based politicians and government officials are also struggling with transparencies and accountability, producing inaccurate financial reports, and making downright false claims. These actions, state by state, and taking as a whole, are leading us toward a significant national crisis. So how is it that the federal government would not use accounting gimmicks to hide its true costs like the states do? Folks, the grassroots of the con movement are good and decent people looking to make a positive difference in the direction of this country. Yet, we cannot say the same for their leaders. If that isn't the case, how do you explain such sophomoric mistakes from a group of constitutional seniors? For more on the con, visit jbs.org and click on Action Projects to see our educational tools for the Choose Freedom Stop a Con Action Project. And if you like what we do, then be sure to share this video with your family and friends. Until next week, we'll see you then.